There's life coaches, leadership coaches, business coaches, executive coaches, health and wellness coaches, parenting coaches, relationship coaches, trauma informed coaching, money coaches, career coaches, marketing coaches, sales coaching, and you name it, there is a coach for that. Now, let me tell you a little bit about how this evening is going to run. And to find a coach, you can go to www.edmontoncoaches.com and you'll see it in the chat box. And I just saw we have someone from Florida joining us this evening, and that is fantastic. Thank you for joining us from Florida, Sangudo, Edmonton, Nanaimo. So this is amazing, and thank you for joining us. So we have 5 speakers, 10 minutes each. Tonight is an opportunity to hear from these 5 Edmonton-based coaches on how coaching can support you in your life, work, and relationships. It is our hope that you will take away something of value from these presentations. Now, all the names in the stories that they've shared this evening have been changed to maintain confidentiality. And as we go through the presentations, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box. We will select a few of those questions to go through at the end of the evening. Now, remember, again, tweet, Facebook, even share on LinkedIn your favorite nuggets from each of the speakers or coaches this evening. Again, inviting you to use the hashtag Coaching Advantage or hashtag ICW 2021. This evening will be fast-paced, full of energy, and above all, fun. Now, who here learns more when they're having fun? I knew it. Just drop it in the chat box. Let us know if you're one of those people who learn more when you're having fun. Oh my gosh, we have someone from Virginia too. Amazing. Hong Kong. Thank you for joining us. This is fantastic. So, great. Let's get started with our first speaker. Don McCoy is going to be presenting to you in Who is Driving Your Car? Don McCoy is a published author, university instructor, human resource leader, and above all, a coach. She has been coaching for 5 years, and while she coaches aspiring leaders in all industries, her niche has become local government and not-for-profits. She holds an ACC accreditation with the ICF and recently left her corporate job to allow more time for coaching. Please welcome Don McCoy.
Hi, thank you. Have you ever felt like you were a spectator in your own life? Maybe your career did not seem to be in your control, or you felt like you're a victim of circumstance. You used to be focused, driven, and determined. You were rocking it. Then, one day, you realized you were not in control anymore. You were no longer the person making things happen. Things were happening to you. You were having a problem getting inspired and felt like you were stuck. You realized you were no longer the person driving your own car. How did that happen? When did you step out of your own driver's seat and let someone else steer your car? Or what if no one is steering and you're just going in circles or meandering off on tangents, ending up in places you never wanted to be? Let me tell you about Nathan. Nathan was a senior level manager. He came to me for coaching because he was determined to get to the next level of his career, which was the top job. He was making great progress. He was stepping out of his comfort zone, making tough decisions, holding his staff accountable, and seeing great results in his team. His self-confidence went up and he was a rising star. He was in the driver's seat and had the pedal to the metal. Then one day, out of the blue, a different Nathan showed up. He seemed beaten down, lacking the energy and drive he had before. He complained about his boss micromanaging him. He felt like he had to ask his boss for permission to do, well, just about everything. He was no longer driving his own car, and needless to say, it did not sit right. What is wrong with this picture? Did I say Nathan was a senior manager? In fact, Nathan is a director of an entire division reporting to the CEO. and is responsible for a multi-million-dollar budget. Nathan did not get to a senior management position by sitting in the driver's seat and letting someone else drive his car. Why did Nathan suddenly feel he needed validation from his own boss and permission to do things that were within his own level of responsibility? Coaching is about helping people come to realizations on their own by asking powerful questions. I asked Nathan, what was it like when you were driving your own car and not letting someone else drive it for you? There are moments in coaching when you know you nailed it. That was one of them. Nathan sat back, got a funny look on his face, and started nodding his head. It was a real aha moment for him. By understanding what he was doing, by naming it, his mindset shifted. It was enough for him to take the steps necessary to take back his power, get back in his own driver's seat, and drive his own career. What does it look like when someone else is driving your car? You may have lost your focus, your direction, and your drive. You may feel like you've plateaued in your career. You used to be the person making things happen. Now they're happening to you. Your career or life feels out of control, and you feel like a victim of circumstance. You feel like a spectator in your life, not a participant. How can you take back your power? You may need to step back from the situation and evaluate. You may even need to take back your territory and reestablish boundaries before you can be in control again. I can remember as a single mom with 4 kids going to McDonald's and trying to order food while the kids argued, raised their voices, and even pushed each other while I was standing in line. I felt powerless. This happened every time I took them out. But wait, what was I thinking? I was the parent. I had the power. I just had to take it back. Set some boundaries. That simple recognition that I was not in control of my own car was like a switch, and I took back the steering wheel. I put the kids in the back seat and drove them straight home, where we ate leftover Kraft dinner for dinner. I established some boundaries, and they done my behavioral expectations going forward. Many people find the words "take back your power" offensive, like it's a bad thing. But is it? What is wrong with taking back control and stepping into your role as a supervisor, partner, parent? What is wrong with setting boundaries to let people know what they can and cannot do as it impacts you? Taking back your power is simply regaining control of your life, doing what you're supposed to be doing in the first place. It's not negative. It's about being in control of you. What are some signs you may have given away your power and stepped away from being the driver of your own car? You see your boss coming down the hall and you feel a strong pang of fear and an overwhelming urge to turn back around and go back where you came from. Having a performance conversation with one of your employees strikes fear in your heart. You're afraid to bring up an idea at a meeting, even though it is your area of expertise. You resent your supervisor for not letting you do your job, or you don't want to make a decision because it will make you feel like it'll be just overturned anyway. How do you get back into the driver's seat? How do you take back your power and regain some control? The first step is to be aware of what you're feeling. Name it. You are not in control right now. Gina, a senior communications manager, was very frustrated with her direct report, who blatantly ignored company rules and was continuously bringing out her cell phone, texting, and checking social media. This took significant amounts of time away from her real work and resulted in missed deadlines, giving the entire department a bad reputation. Even though Gina was her manager, she was reluctant to have a difficult conversation with the employee because the videos the employee produced, when she got one done, were highly praised in the organization, giving her a perceived degree of power, which she took advantage of. To take back that power and be the driver again, Gina had to first be aware of what was holding her back from managing the employee, and then give herself permission to step back into her role as manager. The next step is to understand. Identify who or what is driving your car. Challenge your limiting beliefs, wherever they are coming from. In Gina's case, her limiting belief was that her employee might quit if she was confronted about her behavior. What are you afraid of? Fear is the biggest challenge that holds us back. Just identifying your fear is the first step to help you overcome it. Remember Nathan, the senior manager with the controlling boss? Nathan was afraid his boss would impact his career goals. He felt he needed his boss's support to move up in his career. This need for validation led to a change in Nathan's behavior where he shifted control to his boss and invited him in. Another step is to shift your mindset. Change your perspective just a little. Even a small shift can be what you need to change the way you frame yourself, your career, or your life. James was focused and driven for the first 3.5 years of his engineering degree. Then, during his final term of university, he found himself lacking motivation, letting the deadlines drive his work habits, and his grades suffered as a result. I invited him to think about what it was like when he was the person who made the decisions and drove his career journey. Almost overnight, the switch turned back on and he took control again, doing his homework, meeting deadlines, and graduating with an engineering degree. A small shift in his mindset helped him get back in the driver's seat. Banish your negative self-talk. In coaching school, they taught us to think of negative thoughts as ducks quacking in the background. Ignore the ducks. Better yet, shut the duck up. Finally, you can get back into the driver's seat with a little help from a mentor, a coach, a friend, perhaps attend a training session. Sometimes we all need a little help seeing the forest through the trees. What is controlling your career or your life right now? Some things we cannot control, like the pandemic, loss of a job, and the lockdowns. But there are some things in our control, like what we do during the day, how we approach a job search, whether we engage a coach, etc. Even taking back control of one thing can help you move forward and help you step back into the driver's seat. I know quite a few people have given up searching for a job blaming the pandemic. They sleep in, binge watch Netflix, and stay up all night. Just setting an alarm, showering, and getting up at the same time each day can help them feel more in control. Feeling like you're in control again can be a very powerful success driver. To summarize, awareness is the first step to getting back into your own driver's seat, taking back your power, and gaining control of your life. Once you're aware of what is happening, the next step is to shift your mindset even just a little. Then set some boundaries to make sure you stay in the driver's seat. Taking back control of your position, your career, or life starts with asking yourself the question, would you consider yourself a driver or a passenger right now? Who is driving your car? And I leave you with this one question. What is one thing you can do today to take back some control and put yourself back into the driver's seat? Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Now grab the wheel, take back control, and shut the ducks up. John Donner is our next speaker, finding the eye in the middle of the storm. John Donner is an ICF certified leadership coach living in Edmonton, but coaching internationally. After 35-year career in Alberta Public Service, John turned to coaching to pursue his long-term interest in leadership. John trained in executive coaching at Royal Roads University and enjoys helping leaders step into new challenges. Take it away, John.
Thank you, Deborah. Hello. Today I want to talk with you about finding the eye in the middle of the storm. You may be thinking, John, there's no eye in the middle of the storm. I know, my wife pointed that out. She said, maybe I was thinking about a hurricane that has the eye in the middle, that area of calm. But really what I wanted to focus on was, in any storm, how do you carve out a bit of time to think about how you will behave in the storm, how you need to show up? How do you find the eye in the middle of the storm around you? What I want to share today is that coaching provides time in the eye of the external storm, but it also provides a thinking partner to quiet the internal storm of gremlins. Don called them ducks. I call them gremlins. It also gives you an opportunity to begin and practice what I call the learning cycle of reflection and action. And the result of that is that we start to take action without reacting and without procrastination for fear of failure. You've probably seen it's busy out there. Over 50 years ago, Peter Drucker, the first guru of leadership, said time is the scarcest resource. Got news for you, Peter. In the last 50 years, it's become even scarcer. Time has sped up. How do you answer the question, how are you? Chances are you've used one of these. I'm crazy busy. I'm in back-to-back meetings or back-to-back Zooms. My priorities keep changing. I don't have time to think. Things keep being moved up on me. You may feel a little bit like Winston here. Try to hold your head above the rocks and the things that are weighing you down as there's a swirl of demands on your time.
John, your screen's not sharing.
Well, let me see what I can do about that. So here I am talking about Milton and holding his head up above this storm. And one of the things I wanted to point out is that we live in a volatile world. The US military talks about it as a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. This is the kind of world in which you need to be thinking before you act. But what we're finding is we don't have time because we're so driven by events. I was there. This is me in the web of busyness. I was driven by events. I was trying to build an organization. I was trying to build relations with external stakeholders. I was trying to get certain projects done. I was so focused on the now, I wasn't taking time to think about who I needed to be in the moment and what I needed to do longer term. Until I met Sandra Kratz, and that's a real name, not a makeup name. Sandra walked in as my coach, and I started to book time with her. And I realized that what I was really doing was booking time with myself. This was me time to think about the things that I didn't otherwise have time to think about. It was a calming time. And I still remember Sandra walking in and suddenly becoming more calm, more thoughtful. As she asked me questions, those kind of questions Don's referring to, that started me thinking about who I needed to be in order to take more control over my time. It was thinking time, but that wasn't all it was. It also helped me deal with some of those internal gremlins. Maybe you can identify with some of these gremlins. Perfectionism. It's got to be perfect or I'll get criticism or it will fail. That inner critic that keeps pointing out, you're wrong there, even before you even get the words out. The imposter syndrome. Who do you think you are? How do you think you got here? How are they going to discover what you really are? What will they think about that? And that gremlin that keeps you focused on your past mistakes rather than what you were successful with before. Coaches help us overcome obstacles. They help us to get out of being driven by the gremlins, which might drive us into a tree or up a tree. What Sandra introduced me to is what I call the reflection action learning cycle. Taking time to think before I move to action. And you'll note that the action arrow moves us ahead. So it's not just a swirl of staying in one place, it's actually progress. Let me break it down for you. The reflection part is having an issue that you want to work on, why it's important to you, and how does it relate to who you are. Don talked about beliefs. What is it I believe? What do I have to overcome? How do I recognize that I am capable? I have options. And here's the big one. What will I do? What is my intention? We often talk about shoulds. What are the shoulds that you need to transfer into wills? Because when you say, I will do something, that is a commitment to yourself that reinforces the brain to do that. Let me give you an example. Changes at work mean that I feel like I'm bombarded with a whole series of requests and I don't see the big picture. I no longer feel connected and I'm starting to feel, gee, am I doing my job? It relates to who I am because I want to be significant at work. So what can I do about that? Well, in the past, I realized that I've actually helped shape my job and shape the plan that gives meaning to that. I have options. I could find a new job, or I could pursue this with my boss, and we all have bosses. I will have the conversation about the plan and what my job can be, and I will move that ahead. That's the intention side. But intention without action is simply a dream. The next part is actually putting it into action. And we often recognize we move from intention into action and stop there. But that's not the whole end of the story. Taking a step to look at observing what happened, what information can we take from that, how do we assess that, and how can we turn that into our next action? So, if I'm going to talk to my boss and have an intention to talk to my boss, several things could happen. I might show up and I'm frustrated because it doesn't make the agenda. Or she doesn't like it and we have a disagreement and I might be upset. Or she might accept it and I'm like a dog that just caught the car. What do I do next? In those first two cases, what can I do differently that actually puts it on the agenda? Maybe I need to give her advance warning. Maybe I need to give her some information ahead of time because she needs some soak time. How can I learn and move forward based on what the result was of that action? As we move through this process, it actually becomes a learning spiral toward our goals. I learn in each cycle what works, what doesn't, and what I might need to change or how I might need to move on. But I also learn a cycle of reflection leading to purposeful action and action leading to reflection. What this means is if something goes wrong, I'm not defeated. I simply have more information and I can go on. I'm not caught up that everything is invested in one activity because I know I will learn and I will move on. I start to break it down into steps that spiral me or move me toward successively toward my goals. So coaching develops and practices that reflection action learning cycle. By choosing a coach, I carve I time. I get help confronting the internal gremlins. I develop the habit of response rather than reaction. As I live the reflection action learning cycle, I learn to take time and reflect on my own, and I avoid fear and feeling defeat. As I progress through the cycle, action by action, I progress to my goal. The plan is not too big because I take it step by measured step. I started by talking about Peter Drucker and time being the scarcest resource. In that same year, another guru said, or rather sang, I just dropped in to see what condition my condition was in. That's really what Don was talking about in terms of mindset. How do we identify who we are and what we need to be? It begins by carving out I time to think about who I am and who I want to be. Finding a companion, a thinking partner, a coach can be a big part of that. If you find yourself feeling the storm, if you find yourself with internal gremlins that are too loud, if you find yourself reacting or procrastinating, you may be ready to find a coach. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, John. So everyone, I just want to remind you to put questions that you want answered in your Q&A box so that we have the panelists being able to answer those questions for you. So, just reflecting on John's presentation, how many of you need to start booking some me time? Do you have some obstacles that you need to overcome? And really, what is it? What will you do? Thank you, John. Now, our next speaker is Gail McDonald. Make failure your friend. As a professional speaker and facilitator for almost 20 years, Gail has inspired audiences from diverse backgrounds in both private and public sectors. She's delivered a variety of training from communication skills, customer service, leadership, and life after layoff. She has also helped Canadian Armed Forces personnel successfully reintegrate back into civilian life. Gail helps us understand that, as opposed to our greatest anxiety, failure is our friend, the only way in essence to build resilience needed to ultimately achieve success. Please welcome Gail McDonald.
Thank you, Deborah. Why would anyone want to make failure their friend? Isn't failure negative? Doesn't failure stop us from getting closer to the goals that we actually want to achieve? Absolutely not. The reason you want to make failure your friend and really learn to embrace failure is so you can develop your creativity, your innovation, think of different ways of doing things. And the only way that we can get really good at a craft or a skill or anything that we want to achieve in life is if we get started and we do it poorly many times. Think about times in your past that you wanted to step out. You wanted to step out of your comfort zone. You wanted to try something new, but there was something getting in your way. We all like to feel the comfort of familiarity and staying where we're at, and growth is very uncomfortable. If you're not experiencing discomfort, you're just not growing. And by not experiencing failure, you really are failing in a way. You're failing yourself. You're not giving yourself the opportunity to really learn and grow. At the age of 47, I decided I wanted a career change, and I decided to become a life coach. And when I decided to become a life coach, not too many people actually knew what a life coach was, myself included. And I remember sharing it with my husband and happily informing him that I was going to change my career direction and this was it. And I really felt like it was my calling. And he had some questions for me, and rightfully so, because there was an investment. His first question was, what exactly is a life coach? and, and I very honestly said, I really don't know at this point. Well, what does a life coach do? Why do people need a coach for their life? And again, I said, I'm really not sure about that part either. And of course, the money came into it. What kind of a job can you get as a life coach? How can you earn a living as a life coach? And I honestly replied once again, I really don't know, but I was bound and determined to find out. And he said, oh, and that was it. So I registered for my training. And a few weeks after that, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And that was in that was in April of 2003. And she actually passed away that following July. And of course, during that time, I had to support my dad to transition into his new life of living without his partner of 60 years and go through everything that we had to go through when someone passes away. And of course, address my own grieving as well. And so by the time I was able to actually begin my training, a full year had gone by. And I had a full year to change my mind. I had a full year to back out. I had a full year to convince myself that I might fail. What if I didn't finish? What if I couldn't get a job after that? And what if the other people in the class were smarter than I was, or answered more questions, or just knew more than I did? And I remember thinking, the 3 years is going to pass. And my choices are become a life coach or not. It was just that simple. And the fear of failure, of not doing it, was greater than the fear of actually proceeding with it. And as you can see, it worked out very well. Even though I was terrified, even though at many times I felt that people were smarter than me and they had better answers, and even though the practicums were absolutely paralyzing with 8 or 10 classmates listening to our coaching skills, I made it through, and I never would regret it. Those were the 3 best years of my life, and it's the best decision I've ever made. And it's brought me to be with you here tonight and to meet people from all around the world, amazing colleagues and amazing clients. When I look back and I think about the thoughts of failure that I had, they really were just my perception. And sometimes that's what failure is. It's our perception in our minds. And what's important is to actually shift the perception of how we feel about failure. That can also help to reduce the fear if we learn to understand that failure is part of the process. Failure is part of moving forward. So I have another story to share with you that ended up being a little less than ideal. And years ago, we decided that investing in land for a beautiful development that was going to be created was a really good idea. And it was so exciting. We saw pictures of previous developments that had been created, and people had a great return on their investment. And why not? It's worked for many others. Why wouldn't it work for us? Well, why it didn't work for us is because the Alberta economy went into the tank. And we all know that that is somewhat of a regular occurrence, unfortunately, in Alberta. And as a result of that, the development went into the tank. I think you know where I'm going with this. And as a result of that, the broker went into the tank and completely disappeared into the tank with our money. So our return on investment was absolutely zero. And I was embarrassed and ashamed. I thought we had done all our due diligence, and it was very difficult to not feel angry and bitter and resentful, feel like that I had been duped. None of us want to feel like we've been taken for a ride, but we were taken for a ride at 120 kilometers an hour or more. And I realized at that point that I had a choice to make, and my choices were stay angry, stay bitter, stay resentful, keep beating myself up because that felt really good. Or I could choose to move on. I could choose to chalk it up to experience. I could choose to embrace the lessons that I had learned. And I could also choose to be more of a joy to be around from my family, friends, colleagues, especially my clients. So the lessons that I learned from that were, I do have a choice. No matter what happens in life, we all have a choice. And that failure in itself is not a noun. It's a verb. It's a thing that happens. I was not a failure. I was a successful individual, a great human being, who made a bad choice that ended in failure. And oftentimes we perceive ourselves as the failure. And that can be very, very damaging to support us in our forward movement. I also learned not to get so excited with the anticipation of something that really wasn't that tangible. And it helped me to get clarity and not jump so quickly. I also learned what was important to me. And most of all, what's important to me is my health, so I can continue to serve others, my family and friends, always at the top of the list, and of course, my clients. Because if I can't show up 110% for my clients, then I believe that I should maybe choose another profession. So important to be there for clients 110%. And what I'd like you all to think about is what is important to you. And if you're at a crossroads right now, if you're thinking of where could I go? I want to do this, but I'm afraid of failure. Think about shifting your perspective on what failure really does mean. And once again, failure is not a noun. You won't become a failure. If you try something, if you reach out, if you take action and you fail, you just need to learn the lessons from it and move on. I found a quote by Arianna Huffington the other day, and it really is most fitting for tonight. She says, we need to accept that we won't always make the right decisions, that we'll royally screw up sometimes. How true. How absolutely true. I have had my share, and when I look back, it's a great topic for conversation and creating laughter. And she also says that it's important to understand that failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of success. And so what I would like to challenge you to do is royally screw up a little bit more. And I'll join you in the fun. I'm all about fun. So let's royally screw up together. I also feel it's extra important to understand that it is a moral obligation that we all have to share our gifts, our talents, and our abilities with the world. Because if we do, we're setting a model. We're becoming a role model for those around us and those that we love so dearly and that count on us, that look up to us. And we can give a greater contribution to the world by sharing our gifts, talents, and abilities so others can share theirs and be a role model for others in their lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gail. We need to all practice royally screwing up. So, for our attendees, the questions I leave you from Gail's presentation, is there something new that you want to experience? Perhaps it's time that you step out of your comfort zone. And have you stopped yourself because of your fear? And what are the perceptions that you need to start to shift? Thank you, Gail. Our next speaker, James Greengrass, is going to be talking about developing emotional intelligence, the nicer approach. Now, James Greengrass is the founder of Fortifico and brings many years of experience in organizational leadership, both as a senior officer in the Canadian Armed Forces, as an executive manager in Alberta Public Service. His mission is to equip leaders for success. He helps them to understand themselves more fully and equip them with tools to help them apply better leadership principles. Please welcome James Greengrass.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Deborah, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As a leader and as a coach of leaders, I've been intrigued for many years by this idea of emotional intelligence and the impact it plays on leadership. Now, emotional intelligence is just a catchy phrase that we use to describe a combination of awarenesses and skills that allow us to operate effectively in the presence of strong emotion. Now, that's pretty easy to say, But there's a couple of questions in that that have perplexed me for a long time. The first one is, why are our emotional intelligence skills so inconsistent? Let me illustrate with a personal example. About 15 years ago, I was the commanding officer of an Army unit, and part of my responsibility was for the discipline of my soldiers. That meant that sometimes I had to sit as a judge in a summary trial. And one day a soldier was brought before me, and they were charged with an offense under the National Defense Act. I reviewed the evidence, determined that the soldier was in fact guilty of the offense they were charged with, and I considered the rehabilitation of the soldier, the discipline of the unit, precedent, the principles of justice, and I sentenced the soldier to a punishment that, to the best of my ability, satisfied all those requirements. And I went home and had dinner. At the same time, I was in loco parentis to a young teen who was starting to get in a lot of trouble, like red and blue flashing lights at the end of the driveway at 3 a.m. type of trouble. And the time had come that I had to make some decisions about what we were going to do about that. But I was more like this guy. I could not make a decision. No matter how hard I tried, I could not make a decision. So why is it that as a commanding officer, I had the ability to do things that I couldn't do in this other role, even though the problems seemed to be the same? We'll come back to that. The second question that's perplexed me is, why are emotional intelligence skills so challenging to develop? A while back, I was coaching a newly promoted executive who was wrestling with imposter syndrome, which you've heard about already. And maybe some of you have experienced this. It's that fear in the pit of your stomach that you actually don't deserve to be where you are. You're not qualified to be where you are. You are a fraud and a failure, and today everyone's going to find out. It's a dreadful load to have to carry, and this person wanted coaching to help them with it. Well, one of the textbook answers is to invite them, reflect upon your past accomplishments and draw confidence from that. And I held this out to my client and said, what if you did that? And they snorted very loudly, turned their camera so I could see the wall behind them, which was festooned with diplomas and certificates and commendations and awards. And they said, James, I have an I love me wall. It's not helping. So what was missing? I think that some of the things we've learned in the last while about how our brains work suggest why this happens, but more importantly, suggest a way forward for dealing with it. In the last 20 years, we've developed technology that finally allows us to look inside our skulls and watch our brains work in real time. And we've learned some fascinating things. One of the things we've learned is that thinking and feeling actually reside in two different parts of our brain. Emotions rooted in this part of the brain you can see here called the limbic system. And the limbic system is ruled by this structure called the amygdala, which you see at the bottom there. And if the amygdala had a philosophy of life, it would be this: be afraid, be very afraid. I think of the amygdala be a bit like a tiger. Most of the time, it looks like the tiger's asleep, but it's actually not. Our amygdala is monitoring all our sensory inputs and going, is there anything here that's a potential threat? And if it notices something, the tiger starts to wake up. And if that threat persists or escalates, the tiger will actually seize control of our brain. And our ability to think and our ability to make choices eventually shrinks down to three options: fight, flight, or freeze. Let me give you an example, a taste of what this might feel like. I'm going to read off a series of numbers and arithmetic operators, and I invite you to do the mental math in your head as we go along here. So here we go. 3 plus 5 times 4 divided by 12 . It wasn't supposed to do that. Okay, no plant survives contact. The tiger was supposed to be accompanied by a very loud tiger roar, which has a real visceral impact on all of us. And my assumption is that most people like me would suddenly find it really hard to remember the number. Just assume that happened. Okay. Here's the bad news. The bad news is that perceived social threats, we've learned, actually affect our brain physically the same way that physical threats do. It's not as sudden or dramatic, but it escalates over time. So eventually, it affects us the same way that that tiger was chasing us. So in respect to dealing with this young man, status, my whole identity as this person who was supposed to be a parental figure to him, certainty, my fears about what was going to actually happen, relatedness, this sense that we were losing the connection that we once had, and fairness, my anger that what was happening was so unfair to me and undeserved. And the result is my amygdala was slowly but surely seizing control and eroding my ability to choose and to think. And consequently, I could not make a decision in this space that I could make very easily as a commanding officer, because emotions were much more important to me in this other space, and my emotional intelligence skills weren't strong enough to navigate those rough waters. But here's the good news. It is actually possible to tame the tiger through forming new emotional habits, because our limbic system actually can learn, but it doesn't learn through new information. It learns through new repeated action, new habits, which ironically is why reading about emotional intelligence in and of itself doesn't do anything to improve our emotional intelligence. Trust me, I've tried. What I'd like to offer you is a way of using a habit to help us practice forming new emotional habits. I call it the nicer model, and it starts with noticing. Most of us, most of the time, are not really aware of what's going on in us emotionally until it breaks a certain threshold, until the tiger wakes up, at which point it's almost too late. There are ways that we can learn to be more attuned to our emotions in real time so that we get earlier warning. I've learned that a tension in my solar plexus is a cue that strong emotion is rising in me. And that's a trigger for me to move to this next step, intervene. We want to put the tiger back to sleep. There are a number of ways of doing this that actually work with our body's nervous system. I'd like to offer one to you. Would you please hold your hand up like that? Grasp your thumb. Hold it about as firmly as if you were holding a puppy or a kitten. We're going to breathe in through our nose for a count of 4, hold our breath for a count of 4, and breathe out for a count of 4. Let's do it. Now, grasp your index finger and we'll repeat. And the middle finger, and repeat. Now, if we had more time, we'd work through all the digits of our right hand and all the digits of our left hand, but we don't have that much time. But you get the idea. And I suspect that if you notice what's going on in your body, you probably feel a little more relaxed than you did a moment ago. The tiger's going to sleep, and that opens up our ability to think more broadly, to see possibilities, and to make more choices than the 3 that our amygdala makes possible for us. Having made, now we feel free to choose the emotional intelligence response that we actually want. And we can then enact that choice. And then reflect on it. Like John was talking about that reflection action cycle, this is the place to reflect. What did I do? What did I expect would happen? What did happen? What have I learned? What would I like to do differently next time? And those are all great coaching questions, by the way. And armed with those, you are now prepared to go through the cycle the next time strong emotion arises, which it will. And each time you go through and set yourself up to make the choice that you want to make, you are building that habit in your brain of emotional intelligence, and it will eventually become your default setting. Before I leave this, remember that client with the imposter syndrome that I was talking about? The challenge he was facing is that you can't start with an act. You have to start with preparing yourself to be able to make those choices. And the suggestion I was offering him wasn't working because I wasn't preparing the ground. So in conclusion, I'd like to leave you with this thought. Taming tigers is a team sport, really. And I encourage you to find a learning partner, somebody you trust, somebody with the requisite skills. Could be a friend, could be a family member. Hey, it might even be a coach. Someone who can hold up a mirror so that you can see the things that you otherwise miss. Because as humans, we all have blind spots. Somebody who can encourage you and hold you accountable as you walk through this journey, because it's hard work, but the goal is sure worth it. So I encourage you, use a nicer approach, and I wish you the best of luck in taming your tigers. Thank you.
Awesome, James. Thanks so much. I love the imagery that you used of the tiger. That is fantastic. And just watching how we shift when we come across a stressful situation. It's something that we all can relate to. So, who of you out there need to tame your tiger and that you get reactive? And now you can use the nicer approach, make intentional choices, and build those powerful habits. I'd like to introduce you to our final speaker of the evening, Dan Oler, and relationships by design rather than by default. Now, Dan is a professional certified coach with ICF, a master practitioner in neuro-linguistic programming, among other certifications. He specializes in relationships and interpersonal communication. With his wife, Carol, a certified coach, they offer couples coaching, relationship recharge, getaway retreats, and strategic planning for couples. Dan also coaches executives, entrepreneurs, corporate teams, and he believes high value life is dependent on high quality relationships. Please welcome Dan Oler. Thanks, Dan. Take it away.
Thanks, Deborah. For decades, researchers, psychologists, marriage counselors have been trying to answer this question. What is the number one cause of divorce? Have you ever pondered that? Was it finances, infidelity, abuse? In my mind, the answer is really simple. The number one cause for divorce is marriage. Now, I don't mean to make light of the situation, because what we're talking about is a serious situation. And I believe that as a society, we have normalized divorce and relationship breakdown. The divorce rate in Canada is almost 40%. And it's expected to spike when COVID restrictions lift and the courts are running again, 40%. And we say, that's normal. And that doesn't include the hundreds of thousands, millions of non-marriage relationships that are tearing apart. And we say, that's normal. Now, this affects the couples who are involved. And because we tend to take ourselves wherever we go, it also affects relationships in the workplace and community. And we say, that's normal. And in my mind and heart, the most serious ramifications are the children. They watch mom and dad, the people that they love more than anything. And they're learning how to treat their future partners. And we say, I know it's tough, sweetheart, but it's normal. I say bullshit. It may be normal, but it's not okay. I don't believe there's ever a good reason to treat someone with anything other than kindness and respect and compassion and love. And no matter how tough a situation might seem, I know that love is always the answer. And I know that you and I can create our relationships by our own design rather than accepting what comes along by default as normal. Let's explore. I invite you to imagine what our world will be like when people are consciously aware of their thoughts, their words, their actions. To be consciously aware, that's one of the core competencies of coaching. Imagine a world where people are not only aware of their thoughts, words, and actions, they take ownership for them. And they also take ownership for their results and their feelings. Ooh, that's total accountability. That's a core tenet of coaching. And imagine what our world will be like when people, they take time to acknowledge themselves and their partners and their kids and others. They celebrate their experiences, their learnings, their failures, their successes. Imagine what our world will be like when people normalize that. I use the word people, they. I invite you to imagine what our world will look like, sound like, and feel like when you and I totally grasp these principles of conscious awareness, total accountability, and celebration. Love is always the answer. I am super grateful. I get to work with the most kind and loveful person on this planet, my wife, Carol. And as professional coaches, we specialize in working with couples to help them to prioritize their relationship, to make them become the best that they can be as individuals and prioritize their relationship as a couple. Why? Well, we've been lying if I told you we were happily married all that long. We experienced the guck and came very close to ending our relationship a number of times. It's not fun, and we don't want that for anyone. We finally figured out how to be consciously aware, how to be accountable, and how to celebrate. And we do that most of the time. And we get to work with the most amazing couples online or when restrictions will allow in person. For example, Andre and Christine, young couple with young kids in a construction business with Andre's brother. Situation at home, not so great, arguing, resistance, resentment, fighting over kids and household and yard work, and not comfortable. And rather than subjecting himself to that, Andre just found it a whole lot easier just to work more. But his mind and heart were distracted by what was going on at home. So his relationship with his brother was failing. He wasn't getting projects completed on time or correctly. Customers were ticked off. They weren't satisfied with normal. They came to coaching. They became consciously aware of their thoughts, their words, their actions. They made changes. They took ownership for their results and their feelings. They started to acknowledge themselves, each other, and their kids and others. They transformed their lives, their marriage, and their business. And their kids, miraculously, their kids are just great kids. They decided love is always the answer. What about Derek and Francine, you asked? Oh, thanks for reminding me. Married for over 52 years, kids grown up and gone, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, in business together for many, many years, at a point where they wanted to retire, but they were afraid to do so. Other than being business partners, they really didn't know each other. Now, based on their values, divorce was not an alternative, but they wanted to learn to like and love each other again and to be able to enjoy the rest of their time together. They weren't satisfied with normal. They came to coaching. They became consciously aware of what they wanted their relationship to look like, to sound like, to feel like. They realized that they could take good, solid business principles and apply them in their relationship. So they created a vision and mission and values statement, a strategic plan for the relationship with achievable and measurable goals and lots of small incremental milestones they could celebrate along the way. They truly learned to love each other and to be able to express their love in meaningful ways. We asked lots of really tough questions. They did the work. They decided for them, love is always the answer. And Jess and Jerry. Now, these two guys, they chose to live in small town, rural Alberta, primarily agriculture and oil and gas community. And besides dealing with the challenges of them owning their sexual preference, they wanted to develop a solid foundation for their lives together, lives filled with happiness and contentment and love. They weren't satisfied with normal. They came to coaching. They became consciously aware of how their egos like to keep them stuck in the dreaded drama triangle, which is a model that accurately describes roles in victimhood. Now, rather than that, they chose to see themselves and each other as creators and to build the trust and the intimacy for long term success. They chose to acknowledge themselves and each other and to really celebrate their acknowledgement, their who they were, to love each other and themselves as well. Like the other couples, we asked lots of tough questions. They became consciously aware of their thoughts, their words, their actions. They took ownership for the results and began to choose their feelings. They acknowledged themselves and each other. They prioritized their relationship, and they truly celebrated what they were doing. Measurable results at home and in other areas of their lives. They decided love is always the answer. So I'm curious to know, how important is your relationship? Carol and I have an amazing relationship. We're best friends, lovers, partners in business. We're not willing to accept normal because that sucks. We know that our relationship can continue to get better every day. It takes conscious, consistent, and persistent work. We both have coaches. We have semi-annual retreats where we consciously and intentionally plan our relationship and our lives. We have developed habits that work. We have 2 scheduled meetings every week. We walk together. We read books together. We have weekly dates. Here's the truth. Life is about relationships. Creating a long-term loveful relationship, it's not easy or convenient, but it's the most valuable investment you will ever make. So I invite you to imagine. I invite you to imagine what our world will be like when you and I are consciously aware of our thoughts, our words, our actions. We take ownership for them and our results and our feelings. We take time to acknowledge ourselves, our partners, our kids, and others. Imagine what our world will be like when you and I normalize that. That's my gift for you. Thanks.
Wow, Dan, thank you so much. And for everyone who's joining us today, love is always the answer. Some questions for you to ponder. Where do you need to be accountable in your relationships? And are you ready to be consciously aware? And what can you start creating and celebrating? Thanks so much, Dan. Now we are moving into that question and answer period. But for right now, I would love for you to jump in and, just drop in the chat some of the nuggets that you've already taken away. I hope you have been, tweeting, going on Facebook and sharing some of these nuggets. And now we're going to move into the Q&A, but please, we'll get everyone to all our speakers to make sure your cameras are on and we will address some of the questions. So one of the questions we have here is we have Kevin asks that you all have some experience with public servants or people who have worked in one or another government function. And can you think of one element, theme, or preoccupation that strikes you as unique to coaching leaders working in federal, provincial, municipal, or NGO cultures? Who would like to take that question on? Okay, let's go with James, and then we'll get Don to add on.
I'll jump in. My answer is shaped both by my experience as a coach and as by somebody who was in that environment for many, many years. I think 2 themes that jump out at me are communicating your intent and being able to build alliances. One of the challenges, of course, of the public service is, especially if you're having to work across ministries, is there can be a culture or a default of you're not the boss of me. And people struggle with how do we deliver results when these people don't actually work for me. Really challenging leadership problem that seems to emerge a lot of times. I'm sure others can probably speak to their own experiences.
Okay. Thanks, James. Don?
So one of the themes that comes to mind for me is from working from a municipal level, it's the impact that the political environment has on whatever the issues are the coachee may be working on at the time. Things might be stable, they might be going well, and then there can be a complete change of leadership and causing a shift of priorities for the coachee, or even setting them back. So that's just a theme I see fairly often, especially around election time in municipal government.
And I think John wanted to add on as well. Thank you so much, Don.
Great, and I'll kind of piggyback on what Don's saying. You know, in business, you have a little more stability of purpose. Things may change with leaders, but you don't have that cycle of change. And I think it's probably about taking the longer view and understanding what that cycle looks like and finding meaning even as things change. And it's probably about finding the way to accumulate value of what you do. It may not be timely now, but it may be timely later, and sort of having the confidence of your own work, even though it may not necessarily be accepted. Quick story, one of my mentors, somebody I really admired, knew his subject matter backwards, went to see a minister, and came away with his carefully thought out recommendation in tatters. And his response was, the minister must take into account things that I don't take into account. He has a broader view and a broader perspective. And he had to lead the rest of the organization through a disappointment as a result of the change. And that's the kind of character I think that comes out more in a governmental context than in other contexts.
Great. We hope we answered your question there, Kevin. Question for Gail. What should I look for in a coach, and how do I find the right one for me?
Wow, that's always a great question. So, what should you look for in a coach, and how do you know they're right for you? Is there needs to be a connection. That is the biggest thing that I look for in clients as well. Is there a resonance? And that is the most important thing. Is there an honesty, a vulnerability? Dan talked about relationships, and relationships in coaching are probably one of the most important relationships that we can develop, because there is a very, very strong purpose and a focus, and people come to be coached because they're having challenges and they want that thinking partner. So I feel too that intuition plays a really big part. And because coaching is so much more widely known now, and there are coaches that are easily accessible through the ICF website, our ICF Edmonton website, speak to a couple of coaches, interview them, ask them some questions, and just really get a feel for each one of them, and see how you connect with them and how they resonate. And also too, I think one critical thing is, are they listening to you? And that is the biggest thing. I've had clients ask me sometimes if I'm still there, and I assure them that I am, but I am just so engaged in what they're saying. And that is a really big thing as well. So make sure that you feel validated, that you feel heard, and that they're really listening. And I'm not too sure what else I could add to that with going into greater detail, but maybe some of the other coaches would like to add on to that as well.
Sure, we'll lead on to Dan, plus my next question is actually for you, Dan, so I'll keep the focus on you here. Go ahead, Dan.
What did you say, Gail? No.
Okay, that took a minute.
No, to add on to what Gail said, most coaches have a niche, a specialty. And so I think that on the ICF website, either the global one or the Edmonton one, you'll find coaches that have a specialty for you. And phone them up, connect with them. Mm-hmm. All of the coaches that I know will give you the time that you need. Mm-hmm. They'll ask questions. You can share what's going on for you. And we're all an honest bunch. If I'm talking to somebody and I'm not the right coach for them, I'm happy to suggest somebody else. Mm-hmm. But as Gail said, go with your intuition, make sure that it's somebody that there's a comfort level there, and yet knowing that the best coach will make you feel the most uncomfortable because of the questions that you ask. So
Absolutely. So, Dan, the next question is for you. How do I talk to my partner about engaging in relationship with relationship coach? I'm not sure if he'll be into it.
that's a really big question that we hear oftentimes. And it's a delicate situation. I think that the big key piece there is a genuine invitation. I think that a lot of us are conditioned to telling. We tell our spouses, we tell our kids what they should be doing. We talk about things, but we don't genuinely ask for what we need and for what we want. And maybe, to be willing to express our feelings and then ask for what we want. I'm feeling, unhappy in the way things are going, or dissatisfied, or I'm afraid. And I'm wondering if we could go see a coach and talk about our relationship. I think some genuine questions are good, and an invitation.
Thanks so much, Dan. And I see that there's also a question directed to myself. How do I keep my mindset positive through the pandemic? One of the things it's like a triathlon. We're like a marathon. We are in a place that we need to be part of endurance. And the questions to ask yourself is, where do I find the most joy? Returning to the basics. And this is a lot of what I stress with my clients. When you feel out of alignment with your values and what you really want to represent in the world, we feel weak. We feel like we're not doing meaningful work. So what I often suggest is that we go back to, are you eating well? Are you getting some exercise? Are you staying hydrated? Are you getting enough sleep? You know, I'm finding that people are caught up in, whether it be social media, negative news, and they don't realize how that influences their mind subconsciously. And that influence to your mind subconsciously affects how you think and feel about what opportunities exist in front of you. That in turn impacts the actions you're going to take. Because if you don't feel like there's opportunity, that you can get the results that you're looking for, you might kick back and say, what's the point? Why bother? So I want to encourage you to pay attention to what you're allowing to influence into your mind so that you can have positive thinking, come from a growth mindset, seeing this as an opportunity to rise to the challenge. I know it's a lot longer than any of us expected, but stay in there. There's light, and there's a whole community around you and relationships to help hold you accountable, to also help you excel. Because when this is all over, this is the opportunity for us moving from defying those challenging times to using that coaching advantage to propel you to where you really want to be. So thank you for that question. My next question is for James. How do I focus on developing my emotional intelligence?
That's a great question. Great and big. Um, I think the first step is to decide where you want to start. Emotional intelligence is a huge area, and you may want to start actually with getting some sort of an assessment of what your emotional intelligence skills actually look like at the moment. And there are coaches who specialize in doing that. And with that, the next thing you can do is decide, well, where do I want to start? Maybe I want to, personal example, maybe I want to get better at having hard conversations and finding my voice and not freezing in the face of conflict. Maybe that's where you want to start. I always encourage my clients, don't try to eat the elephant all at once. Start small, start specific, not vague goals like I want to be more assertive, but in this situation, with this context, I wish to respond in this way, and then work on developing that. That's usually where the advice I give people starting out.
Great. Thank you so much, James. Another question here is for John. How can I build a case for my employer to invest in me for coaching?
That's a great question. I think part of it is helping them build the case for you. What would it look like if I showed up this way? What would it look like if I could deliver in this way for the organization? What would it look like if I was ready for promotion? So putting in using some of those coaching questions, they are coaching questions, that sort of put him or her in the position of saying, this is what is in it for me, for the organization, as well as what's in it for having an engaged person in the job site. So I think it's helping to show the picture of what it would look like, what you think you'll get out of coaching, and what it could mean for them, and ask them for for the support in order to do that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John. And Dawn, I'm thinking of changing careers, but don't know where to start. How can a coach help with that?
Great question. And I think a lot of people are thinking the same thing nowadays from what I've been reading. A coach can help you by asking questions such as to help you figure out what it is that you want to do. They can ask you questions that will make you think about whether this is a shift you want to make or not. So basically, again, all coaches pretty much do is ask a lot of questions, and they are pretty specific to the situation that you find yourself in.
Thank you so much, Dawn. Now, these coaches and the coaches within the ICF Edmonton chapter, you can find on www.edmontoncoaches.com. Remember, throughout this evening, there's so many nuggets here. I have grab the wheel, take back control, and don't forget, shut the duck up. Book some me time and thinking about some of the obstacles you have to overcome. Taming the tiger and thinking about some of the perceptions you need to shift. What will you do? So, as you leave this evening, I want you to take a couple of minutes to reflect before you jump into your next activity of reviewing emails and finishing off work, washing those supper dishes, turning on your favorite show, or putting your children to bed. Is there any area of your life, work, or relationships that you would like to improve on? On a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being no hope now, to 10 being everything is perfect, where would you rate those areas of your life, work, or relationship? Now imagine, what would it be like to jump up just 1 or 2 numbers on the scale? Drop a comment in the chat, the feeling that you would be holding on to if you could just get it 1 or 2 notches up. I want you to think about who is driving your car, finding the eye in the middle of the storm. In what ways can you make failure your friend? How can you start taking a nicer approach? And finally, what can you do today to create or enhance the relationship to be designed and not by default? After all, love is the answer. Make sure you use the hashtag coaching advantage with your favorite nuggets of information from this evening. Go over to find a coach at www.edmontoncoaches.com to find your coach today. And thank you for celebrating International Coaching Week with us. Now, to our audience, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedules to learn more about the experience of coaching. To our speakers, coaches, thank you for sharing your enthusiasm, expertise, and energy with us. And our ICF chapter members, thank you to our chapter members for your dedication to growing the coaching profession. And International Coaching Week team, Kathleen Cameron, Jennifer Horvath, thank you. You have been incredible to work with. And together, we make magic. Again, edmontoncoaches.com. I see some additional questions have popped up. I'm just going to take a look. For Dawn or Deborah, what is the value of certification And does the employer recognize it? And I see, Dawn, did you want to jump off and answer that question?
I was actually just typing an answer to it because I didn't know if you were going to get to it.
Yeah, I just
wasn't
noticed. I want to
sure-
make sure we answer as many questions as we can, and then we'll sign off, and a good night to all.
I wasn't sure if the question referred to certification for coaches or certifications in general. I'll assume it's coaches. Does the employer recognize the certification for coaches? I think it's up to us to educate them what that means. So somebody with an ACC, for example, is the first level of coaching, professional coaching certification with the ICF. And PCC, which Dan is something higher level, more hours, more experience. So I think maybe it's more for the coachee. The coachee would recognize it. And again, it's about the comfort level with your coach.
Yeah. One of the things I think people need to realize when you are working with a coach who has certification, the main difference, the main separator that you will see is that they often have a framework in which they've worked from. They're also abiding by a code of ethics that we follow with the International Coaching Federation. And confidentiality is always huge when you're working with a coach. Now, there are a variety of coaches out there, like we said, that there is a coach for that. Now, if you get an opportunity, see if you can take someone up on a complimentary discovery session. It's often a sample coaching session to see what you're going to get, to see that you're the right fit. Just like you would hire a doctor or a dentist or other people in your team that helps you take care of yourself. I want you to think about coaching the same way. They have to be the right fit for you to get the results that you want for you. Any of our other coaches want to add in to that?
I think, Deborah, that you've really explained it very, very well. And it's just great for the audience to know that if they're really unsure, to really do reach out and take a coach for a spin and see who's driving your car. Get in the coach's car, right? So yeah, absolutely. I just to add on to what you had said, and I think it's a great idea. We're all open to it. We're used to it. We love discovery sessions, and try it out.
Thank you so much, Gail. And Dan, was there something that you were going to add?
Yeah, we're all just ordinary human beings, and one of the beauties of coaching is that we get to learn more about ourselves as we work with our clients as well to help us to become even better people. So, as coaches, we're all, I think, willing to offer a no fee chat to help people learn more about coaching, and we're happy to help. That's just part of the deal.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dan. And I want to be mindful of time, making sure that you can return back to your families, your pets, whatever you have on the go. We want to thank you again for joining us for the Coaching Advantage. Don't forget that there are a wide range of coaches on the edmontoncoaches.com website. Also, there is a survey link in the chat box. We'd appreciate your feedback from this evening. It helps our programming throughout the year and how we can best serve you in our community. Thank you again to our speakers, to our team, our ICF members, and to all of you for making the magic happen this evening. To all, a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.